Now, right now, we're on Labor Day weekend, and everybody's out there. They're grilling hot dogs, making burgers, drinking beers, right? And I don't think a lot of people realize the history of Labor Day, where it came from and why. So I wanted to actually do a little bit of history and say that Labor Day had started back in 1885 when some local municipal ordinances were passed, celebrating the social and economic achievements of American workers. Sounds great, right? And it was a yearly national tribute to the contribution workers have made to the strength, prosperity, and well-being of our country. Sounds all very nice and patriotic, right? After that, the movement spread, to some of the other states, with New York being the first to introduce legislation and Oregon the first to actually pass that legislation, making Labor Day a holiday. And in June 28th of 1894, the federal government actually made Labor Day an official holiday. What's not really known about Labor Day and the origins of it is something known as the Pullman strike. Now, it was a nationwide railroad strike against the Pullman Company, the railroads, and the federal government. Now, people who worked for Pullman, for the rail line called Pullman Industries, lived in a planned worker community owned by a man named George Pullman, a very, very rich railroad magnate. Now, the strike had started when he laid off workers and lowered wages, while keeping the rents for his houses the same. The rent is too damn high, pretty much. The workers had formed a union, the American Railroad Union, but Pullman wouldn't negotiate. So then the leader, Eugene Debs, had called for a boycott to stop the trains from running at all. And that's including federal mail cars. So that's how the federal government got involved. After that, the federal government was able to get an injunction from the court, ordered them to stop the obstruction of the rail lines. And of course, when these strikers had refused and said, no, we're not going to stop our boycott, we're not going to stop our strike, they sent in President Cleveland, Grover Cleveland, sent in the army to basically crush them. And when it was all over, Grover Cleveland and Congress decided that they would do Labor Day as a federal holiday to try and basically not piss off organized labor when it came to the Pullman strike. And what's kind of funny about that is that most of the American people were actually in favor of what the actions the federal government took, as well as some of the larger unions, which is kind of strange to me.
Say we see that today. The National Labor Relations Board says that people who work at Walmart and Target can't strike because they're not already part of a union. So
right, and there's actually a lot of planned strikes that are going to go on Labor Day, and a lot of it is fast food workers. Now we've been doing a lot of reporting on the recent fast food strikes, so I kind of wanted to tie that in. We definitely see a correlation of what happened back then. It's almost like a repeat of history, except without the army and the militias being ordered in. It was basically what I was saying before. Rent has gone up, wages have not. You remember the stat that in no state in America can anybody afford a two-bedroom apartment on a McWage.
Right. In a lot of places, you can barely afford a one-bedroom place without taking a second job.
Or without taking a federal subsidy in the form of a housing voucher, housing assistance, HUD,
right.
welfare, food stamps.
And that statistic that you just said, that no one can afford a two-bedroom apartment, that's just the apartment. No one can afford, on the money that they have, for an apartment. They can't afford that. That doesn't include gas, car insurance, food, electricity, any cable, internet bill. That was just, the statistic was just focusing on the money necessary to afford a two-bedroom apartment.
And there were some pretty crazy numbers, too, when you look at the map, because there was a nice infographic where you could see how many hours you would have to work at a minimum wage job to be able to afford that two-bedroom apartment. And it was like crazy. It was like 80 hours a week. And that's just to be able to afford rent. As you said, Ree, what about anything else? What about food? What about gas? What about clothing? What if you have kids? I mean, that's the problem with what we have going on today. Productivity has gone up, wages have stayed stagnant, and in many cases, inflation has increased the prices of many things, gas, food,
Yes,
etc. And
and
our
while,
money is
meanwhile,
worth less.
And meanwhile, the salaries of the richest 1% and the salaries of the CEOs in charge of these companies have continued to skyrocket up, and now the rich are richer than they have ever been at any other period in American history.
Now, here's kind of an amazing stat that I wanted to get to. The McDonald's CEO, Don Thompson, he just had his salary increased. I'm sorry, he just had his salary triple, and he just got hired in July. And not only that, but Business Insider had actually done some of the math and said that McDonald's could easily double wages and still make $5.5 billion in profit.
Yeah, all they would need to do is take a small cut from their enormous profits, and it wouldn't even be that much. They wouldn't need that much. And also, there's all this talk of how they would need to increase the prices of their products in order to make up for the wage increases. They don't have to do that. They would do that out of sheer greed from not wanting to take one single dollar of a cut from their massive multi-million-dollar yearly salaries.
Remember, the CEO's profit, or I'm sorry, his compensation tripled. 13.75 million he makes in a year. 13.75 million. Do you think that, I mean, even when it wasn't tripled, he was still making a pretty good chunk of money per year. A lot of that money could go into paying a living wage.
I would love to make that much money just once in my lifetime, and I would make it last the rest of my life.
Yeah, it would last for about 3 lifetimes.
I would blow it in a weekend.
Doubtful.
Just like every lottery winner.
Doubtful. Unless you started doing, meth. Doubtful.
Just keep buying houses.
Keep buying houses. What are you going to do with all those houses, man?
Exactly. Ask all the people who win the lottery and go bankrupt.
Buy a bunch of cocaine, spend money on all the hookers, and go to Las Vegas for a week.
But back to the original point. This is actually funny because I didn't know the history that Jeff talked about Labor Day,
and I always thought it was very, very condensed history.
Right.
I suggest everybody look it up. Look up the full Pullman strike because it gets very detailed.
But I always thought it was funny that on Labor Day people don't go to work. So now I kind of know why. But the Pullman strike is interesting because the other unions were against them. And the federal government was used on behalf of the CEO. He might have been the boss. I don't know if they were incorporated at the time, and he was used to crush the people. And I obviously I don't agree with that. I don't agree that the government should force you to negotiate with the union, but I don't believe that the government should disband unions, should force unions to disband. I mean, the whole point of coming together as a union is that you're stronger as a group, and that you want to negotiate as a group, and I think that's perfectly fine as long as it's voluntary.
And you should be able to negotiate, with your employer for wages and stuff, wages and benefits and all that.
Yeah, but I'm saying you should, but it should be up to you. You should be able to do it either as individuals or as a part of a union. But as long as it's voluntary, I'm totally fine with it. And that was. So I would have agreed with the Pullman workers back in the day.
Yeah, because once again they attempted to form their own union, and their employer Pullman didn't even want to work with them at all. They're like, nope, not having it, not listening to it. Let's get the government involved.
Right.
But
and to me, he had that option, and they had the option to shut down the trains. You know what I mean? But I don't think the court should have ordered them to stop the strike. I think that's ridiculous.
I think that's because it stopped mail service, and that was a part of it. But I wanted to go on to just also to mention that right now corporations are sitting on over $1 trillion worth of just cash they don't have any use for. And I hate when people try to say that no, don't worry. If you cut their taxes, cut their regulations, they're going to hire people. No, they don't. They already have all the money that they need to hire people. They're just reinvesting it into themselves. They're doing stock buybacks. They're investing in the Wall Street casino, and
They're lending it to the government.
they're just sitting on it.